Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
All right. Have you ever seen that movie, Jack? It's not that good. Well, some people think it's great. I'm not a big fan. Hello and welcome to the GSMC television podcast. We're part of the mighty GSMC podcast network, and I'm your socially distanced and masked host, Howard Fletcher. And I'm always happy to be here with you today. And I'm here with my trusted engineer, Jack, the Black Pug. And we're positively honored and thrilled to be here with you once again. If you're new to the show, I'd like to give you a very warm welcome and thank you for giving us a try. Lots you can choose from out there. I'm glad that you chose us. We appreciate it and we aim to please. So stick around. I'm sure you'll hear something that you like. At least that's what I hope. And we want to keep you coming back. So keep listening. And if you're one of our loyal listeners, return listeners, you know how I feel about you. You're truly the reason that I am here, that Jack is here, that we are here. So let's have some fun. We have another jam-packed show for you today. The Christopher Nolan movie Tenet gets pushed back again. And I'll say it, I told you so. Other movie release dates are in question, and I'll review that list as well. HBO Max has made a few additions and changes. I'll go over those. NBC has canceled yet another show after its first season. That makes 6. And I will bring you news as it breaks. You know I like breaking news. And I'll talk about Perry Mason, the newest miniseries on HBO, what I like about it, what I don't like about it. And I was a little disappointed. I'll tell you that much right now. But first, let's get started with some breaking Terra news. Gone with the Wind, which was taken off of HBO Max, is now back with 2 additional videos that discuss the historical context of the classic film. Warner Media had pulled the movie 2 weeks ago, citing the need to address its, quote, racist depictions, end quote. In the first video, Turner Classic Movie host and film scholar Jacqueline Stewart discusses, quote, why this 1939 epic drama should be viewed in its original form, contextualized and discussed, end quote. The second is a 1-hour-long video recording of a panel discussion, and the title of the discussion was The Complicated Legacy of Gone with the Wind from the TCM Classic Film Movie Festival. That was in August of 2019, moderated by author and historian David Bogle. Now, Stewart, in what's about 4.5 minutes intro segment, is in it. It's now added as an extra feature for Gone with the Wind on HBO Max, and it calls the movie one of the most enduring popular films of all time. And I would agree with that. At the same time, quote, the film has been repeatedly protested, dating back to the announcement of its production, Stewart says. Producer David O. Selznick was well aware that black audiences were deeply concerned about the film's handling of the topic of slavery and its treatment of black characters. Despite Selznick's assurances to the black community that he would be sensitive to their concerns, Gone with the Wind presents, quote, the antebellum South as a world of grace and beauty without acknowledging the brutalities of the system of chattel slavery upon which this world is based, end quote. That's Stewart. She continues, the film treatment of this world through a lens of nostalgia denies the horrors of slavery as well as its legacies of racial inequality. Stewart also notes that black cast members were not allowed to attend the movie's premiere because of Georgia's Jim Crow segregation laws. In addition, Hattie McDaniel, who was the first African-American person to ever win the Academy Award for her portrayal of the servant Mammy in the film, was not allowed to sit with the other cast members at the Oscars. Quote, watching Gone with the Wind can be uncomfortable, even painful, Stewart says. Still, it is important that classic Hollywood films are available to us in their original form for viewing and discussion, end quote. Gone with the Wind stars Vivien Leigh, Clark Gable, Hattie McDaniel, and Olivia de Havilland. The film, adapted from the 1936 novel by Margaret Mitchell, is set during the Civil War and Reconstruction era. The HBO Max description of the film reads, Scarlett O'Hara's battle to save her beloved Tara is the name of the plantation, and find love during the Civil War. The movie won 8 competitive Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Actress for Leigh, Best Director for Victor Fleming, Best Supporting Actress for McDaniel. The American Film Institute ranks Gone with the Wind as the number 4 best American movie of all time, after Citizen Kane, Casablanca, and The Godfather. All right. Now, I applaud HBO Max's attempt to educate the public about not only about the film, but the societal atmosphere at the time of the film's making. I think it's very important because a lot of times things are done or made. We talked about this a couple shows back when the maker of Friends, the showrunner of Friends, was lamenting the fact that had she known what she knows now, that she would have made the show more diverse. And I'm sure that's quite true. My argument was that she didn't try to know, because from day one, Friends was many voices, including mine, mentioned how unbelievably segregated white Friends was, especially to be taking place in New York City. That was one of the main reasons why I just couldn't get into the show. But she obviously was just not aware of that, according to her. And I think it's very important that when they talk about this movie, that they say that this movie was made in an atmosphere. It wasn't made and the Hollywood producers weren't aware of what they were making. In fact, David O. Selznick knew that there was some backlash from the black community, even at that time, when Black America didn't have the voice it has now about the making of the film, and it was made anyway. But I do agree with her that it's important that we have these films on, and I'm glad HBO Max has put it back on for people to see, and I'm glad they have these other pieces to help educate people. Unfortunately, I have little confidence that the people who probably need to watch that additional content will do so. You know, I just been my experience that most of us who will probably be of a mind to watch this extra content probably agree with it and may know about it and just are watching it for our own edification, just to, maybe get some more facts that we don't have or fill up some holes we may have. Others who love Gone with the Wind because it's such a sanitized version of the South probably have no interest in reading about that or seeing something about that. But anyway, that's something new on HBO Max. And in the same light, here is some breaking blackface news. Hulu has removed 3 episodes of Scrubs, which featured characters in blackface, following a request by the show's creator Bill Lawrence. And ABC Studios sources confirmed on Thursday, which was yesterday. The episodes in question are titled My 15 Seconds, and that was in Season 3, Episode 7, My Jiggly Ball, Season 5, Episode 4, and My Chopped Liver, Season 5, Episode 17. One featured Zach Braff's lead character in blackface at a party, while another saw Sarah Clark's character in blackface during a fantasy sequence. The news comes only 2 days after multiple episodes of 30 Rock were removed from streaming platforms and syndication for the same reason. Lawrence confirmed that the Scrubs episodes were being taken down when replying to a tweet about a story that ran in Vanity about the 30 Rock news, about 30 Rock removing those episodes we just mentioned. Scrubs aired across 9 seasons from 2001 to 2010, with the first 7 broadcast on NBC and the final 2 ran on ABC. Now, the 30 Rock removal came about at the request of creator Tina Fey and NBC Universal. Fey wrote a letter to the platforms which carry the series, saying that the blackface episodes were, quote, best taken out of circulation, end quote. The comedian apologized for, quote, for any pain that they have caused, end quote. Quote, as we strive to work to do better in regards to race in America, we believe that these episodes featuring actors in race-changing makeup are best taken out of circulation. I understand now that the intent is not a free pass for white people to use these images. I apologize for the pain they may have caused. Going forward, no comedy-loving kid needs to stumble on these tropes and be stung by their ugliness. I thank NBC Universal for honoring this request, Fey wrote. Scrubs is the latest in a growing number of series, past and present, which are reevaluating their depictions of race. Less than 2 weeks ago, Netflix pulled an episode of Bob Odenkirk and David Cross's 2015 comedy show With Bob and David because a scene featuring Cross in blackface. The sketch in question was called Know Your Rights and appeared in the 3rd episode of the show's first and only season. Okay, now, first thing, I'm not starting this show out on a downer. I think these are good. These are positive moves. But unlike Gone with the Wind, which was the first story I did, I've never seen any episodes that were referenced. I didn't watch Scrubs. I didn't watch a lot of 30 Rock. I have seen 30 Rock. I didn't see any of the episodes in question. And I didn't see the Bob Odenkirk, David Cross series that's on Netflix. So I have no opinion on whether or not the blackface or race-changing makeup, as Tina Fey likes to call it, would have been offensive to me or not. For those of you who are first-time listeners to me, I am a black person. I identify as a black American, and so I feel as though these moves are made on my benefit or for the benefit of people like me. I don't know if I would have found them offensive. I find Gone with the Wind offensive, but I don't know if I'd find these offensive. There are situations, now I'm speaking just for Howard Fletcher, this is my opinion. There are situations that costuming that changes the race of an actor, and when it's done for dramatic or comedic purposes to make a point about racial differences, is entirely different than doing it for pejorative or disparaging purposes. Okay? However, at present, we as a society don't seem to be able to navigate that intellectual territory very well. So probably removing these episodes altogether is the prudent move. I hope, though, that as someone who considers myself to be a writer and somewhat of a creative type, it's my hope that as a society, we'll be able to one day be able to reasonably interpret what is meant to be harmful, disrespectful, and demeaning from what's done in the spirit of political commentary and sarcasm. Now, I did not see those episodes in question. I don't. So it's probably best they were taken down. Although, I do know, personally, some of the people that were on. I don't know Tina Fey, but I've met some of the people involved with the 30 Rock production. And the people that I know, and you never know somebody, but I'm pretty sure there would have been some uproar or some talk about the blackface in that episode or the race-changing makeup, which it probably was rather than blackface. I would have heard about it before now. I would have. But, right now we're at a place where the prudent thing, the best thing to do is just to leave it alone. I do think there's some value, again, in art that's made, or race-changing makeup, or playing with race that is done for the purpose of making a political or dramatic or sarcastic point. And that's taken away if you just eliminate that altogether. But right now it's a very difficult thing to do. and be on the right side of history, as they say, or at least not create a furor when all you're trying to do is make a point. And usually the point is in favor, or you're making the point to the benefit of the people who might be the most offended by it. So that's what happened, and I wanted to bring those up both together so we can get those out of the way. But I think they're important developments in television because you're going to see in the near future, or for the time being is probably the better expression, that some areas that were always, used to be a big area to play with in the 70s, where I think a lot of progress was made, may not be touched on, ironically, 30 years later. 50 years later, 50 years later, because, we're just not in that place right now. It's a very sensitive subject. So that's that for that. Next, I'm going to be talking about, it's going to be an I told you so segment. I'm going to tell you, we're going to talk about Tenet being postponed again, and I'm going to tell you why I told you so, and I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen next. So go get some refreshments, go get some in your happy place, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Don't go away. All right. I dressed up like David Bowie one time in college, Jack. I did. I had to put on some makeup. I don't know if I'd do it today. We are back. Tenet. It's been postponed again, y'all. Warner Brothers has again pushed back the release date for Christopher Nolan's Tenet. It's the second delay for the highly anticipated tentpole, which has been primed to reignite moviegoing after lengthy cinema closures due to what? The coronavirus pandemic. The movie, which cost $200 million, was initially slated to arrive in theaters on July 17th, but was later postponed to July 31st. Now it will be released on August 12th, and your boy Howard here says that date, I'm not even 50-50 on that date. I don't think Tenet's coming out until after Labor Day. Maybe around Christmas. Here we go. Quote, Warner Brothers is committed to bringing Tenet to audiences in theaters on the big screen when exhibitors are ready and public health officials say it's time, a Warner Brothers spokesman said in a statement. In this moment, what we need is to be flexible. We are not treating this as a traditional movie release. Yeah, I know. You spent $200 million on it. We are choosing to open the movie midweek to allow audiences to discover the film in their own time. And we plan to play longer over an extended play period for far beyond the norm to develop a very different yet successful release strategy, end quote. In other words, they're not going to be able to fill the theaters, so they're going to have to run it longer to get their money back, which we talked about on this podcast before. The studio has also delayed the re-release of Nolan's sci-fi blockbuster Inception in honor of its 10th anniversary it was supposed to open on July 17th. Now it's opening on July 31st. And as I've said more than once, if Inception doesn't bring people into the theaters, Tenet is not going to the theaters. Not then. Not when they plan on it. The latest shift for Tenet comes after New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced that movie theaters in his state would not be included in Phase 4 of reopening. Without cinemas in New York City and Los Angeles back in business, the big budget action epic will be deprived of two of the country's biggest movie-going markets. As parts of the nation have started to reopen, some states have seen massive spikes in infection rates that could further derail the industry's plan to go back to the movies. Even if multiplexes across the country are able to open to a significant degree, it is still unclear if audiences will feel safe going back to theaters while the disease is still spreading. Exhibitors, in an effort to quell those fears, have detailed new safety procedures that will help keep their theaters clean. Those efforts include increased physical distancing measures, enhanced cleaning protocols, and capped attendance at 50% or less of capacity. Additionally, cinema chains including AMC, Regal, and Alamo Drafthouse will require patrons to wear masks. For now, Disney's Mulan remake is expected to be the first potential blockbuster to open since theaters closed in March. The $200 million budgeted live-action adaptation, they love that $200 million mark, is scheduled to debut on July 24th. But many industry experts speculate that date could be moved back again. I must be an industry expert as well because I'm telling you for sure it'll be moved back. On Wednesday, Disney amended plans to reopen Disneyland, which was set for July 17th as COVID-19 cases continue to escalate in California. Now listen to that. Just leave it there. Disneyland's not opening. They're going to open on the 17th. And so a week later, they think that they're going to have a move. They're going to put Mulan in the theaters. I don't think so. Shanghai Disney and Hong Kong Disneyland Park recently reopened. And Walt Disney World in Florida is still on track to resume business on July 11th. Okay, Disney World in Florida may open on July 11th, only because the governor of Florida will probably do something like that. But Florida's numbers are going through the roof right now for COVID-19. So I don't know how smart that would be, but they haven't touched that date, so we shall see. In the meantime, Russell Crowe's thriller, Unhinged, and Sony's rom-com, The Broken Hearts Gallery, will test audiences' appetite for new movies on the big screen when they launch on July 10th and July 17th, respectively. Okay, let me tell you guys what's going to happen. Because why is this on the TV podcast? I'm going to tell you why. This movie, Unhinged, and this rom-com, The Broken Hearts Gallery, they are prime movies for streaming. Okay? These movies, I don't know what their budgets are. I don't have them in front of me. I guess I could look it up on Wikipedia, but I'm not going to. Those movies don't have hundreds of millions of dollars in budget. Both of them were probably made for under $50 million if I had to guess. Which means they can make their money back through streaming. So what's going to happen? These movies, those two movies, they're going to be what I'm going to coin a term now. They're going to be Invisible Man or Emma'd. Those are two. I'm going to officially today coin those two, those expressions. Invisible Man and Emma'd. Unhinged is going to be Invisible Man. It's going to go into the movies on July 10th. It's going to run for 2 weeks to week box office, and it's going to go to video on demand. Now, the Broken Hearts Gallery might be Emma'd and do the same thing when it's supposed to come out on July 17th. My thought is that if Unhinged really sucks, I mean, well, it might really suck as a movie anyway, but if the turnout at the theater is really bad for it, Broken Hearts Gallery might go straight to video on demand. Because nobody wants to go to the movie theaters right now. Well, I won't say nobody, because somebody will go. Very few people, because I've done my unofficial, unscientific surveys in the street. And most people I know say they want to go back to the movies. They'll eventually go back to the movies. They want to wait and see. So if everyone's waiting to see, what it tells me is that when Unhinged goes, you're going to hear crickets. Okay, when it gets released. Same with the Broken Hearts Gallery. And they're going to go straight to video on demand. But we'll see. So far, I'm betting 1,000, so that's why I feel so cocky. Here is a schedule for the bigger named movies from the big studios that are scheduled to be released in the next 2 months. You have the Broken Hearts Gallery. Well, first we had Unhinged, which I mentioned. Then you have the Broken Hearts Gallery, which is going to supposedly open on July 17th. Disney's Mulan is scheduled to open July 24th. Tenet is scheduled for August 12th. Antebellum is scheduled for August 21st. A Quiet Place Part 2, September 4th, which is Labor Day weekend. And last but not least, this is the one on the list that I want to see other than Tenet, Candyman, which is scheduled for September 25th. Now, of the movies on that list, Mulan and Tenet are the only two that I think absolutely positively have to wait for or have a theatrical run of some sort. If the numbers keep going up the way they are, especially down south, as the way it seems. Now, New York, the numbers are going, in the north. I'm in DC. I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland. The numbers up here have been going down. But see, we wear masks here and we socially distance, just like they do in New York. They're not doing that in some of these other places where the numbers are going way up. And so I have a feeling that best case scenario, the numbers go down and Tenet and Mulan will be able to open near the holidays, maybe like Thanksgiving weekend and then going into Christmas. That's my thought. Well, best case scenario would be Labor Day weekend, which I said earlier in the segment. I think that's kind of being rosy about it, but sometime in 2020, they'll be able to be released, hopefully. What I think might happen, though, is there's going to be a hybrid situation because these studios, Disney and 20th Century Fox and Warner Brothers, need to make their money back from those movies, and sitting them on the shelf is not doing that for them. Now, the good news is that they haven't had to run a whole lot of marketing, which is very expensive as well. You don't see a whole lot of Mulan commercials or Tenet commercials. There are a few, but not very many. So they haven't had to invest in a lot of that. And all the other supplementary things that go along with it, like posters and stuff they have to send to theaters and all of that stuff, they haven't had to do that yet. So that they've saved that money. But what I think they're going to probably end up doing, is running it both on video on demand and in the theaters. So those people that absolutely want to see it in the theater can go see it in the theater and can pay those theater prices to go see it. Well, while meanwhile, they'll also give it, offer it video on demand if things stay the same way they are right now as far as COVID-19 is concerned. But we'll see. Now, I was reading different articles about this setback, and there was one article in, guess what, Variety. Those of you who listen to the show know I read a lot on Variety.com. And there were a couple of comments after the article where you can post comments. And I thought they were interesting. So I want to read them, not only because they agree with me, but because I think it reflects the sentiment of a portion of the viewing audience, a significant portion. I don't want to say it's a majority, but it's a large enough percentage that's going to make a difference. And people who read the articles, like the headline that says Tenet gets pushed back, they're the people who have an interest in seeing this movie, I have to believe. That's the assumption I'm going to make going in. So that's why I think these opinions are very important to what we're discussing right here. The first one is by a guy named Harry Geogotos. and if you're listening to this podcast, thank you. But also, I apologize for mispronouncing your last name. He wrote this on June 26th at 2 a.m. He says, it's gotten to the point where delayed Hollywood blockbusters such as Tenet and No Time to Die, which is the Bond film, by the way, are fair game for illegal downloads. If studios don't have the sense to distribute these films for video on demand, then they're operating in a fool's paradise during this pandemic. Cinemas won't recover. It's time to tear down these multiplex real estate and build high-rise apartment blocks with boutique cinema floors in these high development skyscrapers. That's an interesting thought. People want first-run films in the safety and privacy of their homes instead of being stuck in the cinema from hell. Adapt or die. Well, I'm not as, dystopian as Harry here. I'm not, as nihilistic as he is, but I do think he has a good point. And that's why I wanted to read that one. I do believe that we are going through a societal transition because of this pandemic. And while cinemas won't be a thing of the past, they're not going to go the way of the blacksmith. They still are not the multiplexes as we know them. And movie box office as we've defined it will be different. And I think the video on demand and streaming and even these, quote, boutique cinema floors that George talks about in this posting, that might be something that we evolve into. Never thought of that. And I am an old-time real estate person. I wish I thought of that, but who knows? Maybe it'll happen. I just think we're going to have to develop a new paradigm, and I've talked about that ad nauseum on this podcast. And now I want to read one more post that was underneath, and it was written by Acquisitionist00. And this was written on June 25th at 11:04 p.m. And I'm going to have to fill in some words because a lot of times when people are writing these posts, they are doing it. Just say they're not writing a term paper, okay? So I'm going to fill in what I think he meant when he wrote this. Anyway, if these movies were released for $19.99 streaming on the premiere weekend, they would make more than the waste of a theatrical run, which no one would go to, and a missed theatrical release will have a negative psychological stigma, so direct-to-consumer is the best route. Okay, I get where you're going. Theatricals are a dated format in an age when big screens and a pandemic avoidance while being entertained are paramount. Okay, let me translate what they're trying to say, what I've said before. Most people have a flat-screen television in their home. Some of them are considerable size. They're pretty large. They have good sound. And people have gotten used to streaming now that we've been in lockdown for several months. And so I think that going back to the movies is not as attractive anymore, as I said before. I mean, you can spend $20 on a movie and $20 on a bag of popcorn in the theater or you can pay $20 for a movie at home and $20 on a Domino's combo. So which one are you going to choose? So I think that, in the long run, we're going to see a lot more streaming, and Tenet and Mulan are going to be moved back to later on. But we'll see. But I had to read that because, I had to say, I told you so. Next, I'm going to talk about another show that got axed from NBC. And it was a show that I predicted wasn't going to do well. I'm patting myself on the back this show. I'll tell you more. Go get some Domino's. Talk to you soon. All right, we are back. Sit up, Jack. All right, we are back. NBC's miserable freshman season has delivered its last cancellation. The network on Thursday axed rookie family drama Counsel of Dads. The family drama from Universal Television and showrunners Tony Phelan and Joan Rader. And Joan Rader, they are showrunners at Grey's Anatomy also. And executive producer Jerry Bruckheimer, who's made a bunch of television. Well, this one didn't work. And this show was the last of NBC's freshman class to have its fate determined by the network. Of the 7 new series that NBC ordered for the recently concluded 2019-2020 season, only one, Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, is returning for a second season. All the rest of them were axed. The Counsel of Dads is also NBC's latest attempt to recreate the success of its breakout family drama, This Is Us. Last season, NBC and Universal TV launched family drama The Village in an attempt to find a similarly themed scripted series to launch out of creator Dan Fogelman's Disney-owned hit. Now, like Counsel of Dads, The Village lasted only one season after it inherited This Is Us's time slot after the series wrapped its 18-episode season. So it had nothing to do with the time that The Village was on. It just wasn't as good as This Is Us. Sarah Wayne Callies, Clive Standen, and J. August Richards starred in the series, which launched on March 24th, out of the This Is Us's season finale. Richards, who cites his experience on Counsel of Dads for helping him come out, announced the show's cancellation in a post timed to the Now series finale on his verified Instagram page. The decision to cancel Counsel of Dads comes as little surprise. The series was not part of the network's optimistic fall schedule of new and returning series, with 2 completed pilots already in contention for mid-season 2020 and 5 more likely to be filmed when it's deemed safe in the fall. The network has already picked up 3 new comedies and a drama for the 2021 season, whenever that starts. Now, when this show was scheduled, I said on this podcast that it sounded like a complete downer, okay? And I didn't think it was going to succeed. Now, listen to this. This was the premise. Cancer patient Scott Perry worries about his 5 children growing up without his help and advice. he and his wife Robin recruit 3 friends to act as a council of dads to be father figures for his children. Now Scott dies, and his loved ones form an expanded chosen family. What? Who wants to watch that? Who wants to watch that? Look, This Is Us is the type of series that hits when the stars are in complete alignment, okay? Now, I've confessed on this show that I don't like tearjerker television. So, I don't watch This Is Us. And I told you all, the listeners who've been listening to me, the reason why is because when people referred me to the show, without exception, all of them said, "Oh, I love that show. I cried. Oh, it's such a good show, but I end up crying all the time." Well, that's not my bag. That's not why I watch television. I understand those who do, and I understand that This Is Us is a very good show for that genre of show. But I don't think I'm alone in saying it's not for me. And it's very difficult to pull off a show like that, because there would be a bunch of This Is Us shows on. It's very difficult to do it. You have to have just the right mix, and it has to come on at the right time, and be high enough caliber television so that you hook in a loyal audience. That's a big ask, and it's not easy to replicate, which NBC I think is finding out. But I would also suggest to them that they don't make another show about terminal illness and got somebody preparing got people to raise their children. I just don't think that's a show that people want to tune into every week in and week out. And especially in these times when most of the messaging out of Washington is pretty gloomy, and at best, it's unreliable. Viewers don't want to spend their downtime pondering terminal illness and other people raising their children. So if you're listening, NBC, please give me a call. I have some good programming decisions for you. Now, here is some new breaking movie news, which I talked about last show. Disney has delayed the theatrical release of Mulan for the 3rd time, officially putting an end to Hollywood's hopes of salvaging a summer movie season. The film will now hit theaters, supposedly, on August 21st. The studio's live-action remake was slated to be debuted in theaters on July 24th, but I told you all on this podcast they probably wouldn't make that date. The move comes after the news that Warner Brothers postponed the release of Tenet, a sci-fi epic from director Christopher Nolan, for the 2nd time. That film, starring John David Washington and Robert Pattinson, is now expected to debut on August 12th. And given the latest COVID numbers, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you now, that date's not going to be made. As I said on this podcast, I think the best case scenario for Tenet or any of these big blockbusters is Labor Day, and that is if everything goes right, and I don't think that's going to be the case. I think in reality, the reasonable estimate for these movies, and I'm talking about the $200 million movies, I'm talking about Mulan, Tenet, Wonder Woman, all of those movies, is Thanksgiving. That's what I think. But I understand them trying to be optimistic and trying to keep the theater owners happy and saying, okay, we're going to keep pushing this back, but they're not going to put those movies in the theaters unless there are butts in the seats. Here's a quote. "While the pandemic has changed our release plans for Mulan, and we will continue to be flexible as conditions require, it has not changed our belief in the power of this film and its message of hope and perseverance. Director Nikki Caro and our cast and crew have created a beautiful, epic, and moving film that is everything the cinematic experience should be, and that's where we believe it belongs, on the world stage and the big screen for audiences around the globe to enjoy together," said Alan Horn, co-chairman and chief creative officer, and Alan Bergman, co-chairman of Walt Disney Studios. Now, I know nothing of this production, from the inside, but I can just tell you from the trailers that I've seen and from the budget, which again, it's over $200 million, it is made for the big theater, big screen. And they're not going to release it in any other way, any other form, any other venue, unless there's just no way theaters are open. So they're going to keep pushing it back, folks. With Tenet's vacancy from release calendars, Mulan was positioned to be the first major film to reignite moviegoing in North America, while Nolan, a preeminent supporter of movie theaters, had planned to usher audiences back to theaters with Tenet. Industry insiders suggest that Disney didn't want Mulan to be the test case for new movies amid the pandemic. Absolutely. Nobody wants to be the test case. And that is why Warner Brothers is going to be releasing Inception, as we've talked about on this podcast before Tenet, to see if people will go to the movie theaters at all. Now, movie theaters across the country, and actually across the globe, have been closed for most of 2020 to help stop the spread of coronavirus. Major cinema chains in the U.S., such as AMC, Regal, and Cinemark, have been aiming to resume business in July. When they do open, it's unclear how eager patrons will be to return to movies. And again, given the latest numbers that are coming out of the South, I don't think they're going to be that eager to go into those theaters. Mulan, which cost $20 million to make, is expected to strongly resonate in China. But Chinese movie theaters are all currently closed without a known reopening date. Given the importance of Mulan in China, it would have been risky to release the movie and leave Chinese audiences behind. Two smaller movies, Russell Crowe's thriller Unhinged, which we've mentioned on this podcast before, from Solstice Studios, and Sony's romance drama The Broken Hearts Gallery, are scheduled to launch in theaters earlier in July. They will be the first films to open since theaters started to shutter in the middle of March due to public health concerns. Now, they're going to go to the theaters. Unlike the other ones, they'll test case Unhinged and they'll test case Broken Hearts Gallery. Why? Because they weren't going to do all the, in my assessment, and I think in the studio's assessment as well, those movies were not going to do any type of record numbers. They were just hoping to make a profit. And if they don't do well, they can easily go to video on demand and not lose, credibility and possibly be able to pull in numbers, especially if they get good movie reviews. If the critics like the movies and people just aren't willing to go to the theaters, Unhinged and Broken Hearts Gallery will go to video on demand and they will make their money back most likely. Now, if they bomb, if they're terrible movies, well, that's what happens when you make a terrible movie. You're probably going to lose money. Now, studios aren't willing, and rightfully so, to gamble on the $200 million movie until people start demonstrating their willingness to go to the theaters. And this is the third time Disney has delayed Mulan, as well as Tenet being delayed 3 times. It was originally set to open all the way on March 27th, but was pulled 2 weeks before as coronavirus began to spread in North America. The studio moved the film to the end of July, but some found that to be an optimistic delay, since there was no guarantee that cinemas would be able to reopen to a significant degree by then. Disney has moved around a slew of upcoming titles in the past few months, including The Eternals, which is a Marvel movie, Jungle Cruise, which I know nothing about, and Indiana Jones 5, which could probably be delayed until the end of time, without much pushback, in my opinion. Since production has been halted worldwide for months due to the global health crisis, some of those films would not have been ready to debut in theaters by their target release dates. Like the 1998 animated version, Mulan follows a warrior who disguises herself as a man to spare her elderly father from having to serve in the military. It's the first of Disney's live-action remakes to be rated PG-13 due to sequences of violence. So for those of you who are first-time listeners to me, why am I talking about this on the TV podcast? Well, this is why. Because I am of the opinion, and many other people in the industry are too, that the straight-to-video movie is going to become more common in the this year, but definitely during the next 3 years. And I don't think the theaters will ever recover to pre-COVID numbers. I just don't. Not because people are going to be scared to go to the theater, especially after we get a vaccine. That's not the reason why. I just think that with the people watching movies more through video on demand and seeing that it's not that bad. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of perks to it as far as comfort and budget are concerned. And the fact that during the next 3 to 5 years, home entertainment is going to become more affordable and better. That's just the way of technology. The screens are going to get bigger, and the TV sets are going to be better clarity, better everything, and less expensive. So the sound's going to get better. All of that's going to get better. You're going to be almost able to recreate a similar movie going experience at home. So the only thing you're going to be doing without is the group experience. And the group experience is enjoyable. It's great to see a movie in a packed house with people who are enjoying the movie and interacting with it. There can be a lot of downside to that too, when you talk about people who can be distracting and talking and doing things that maybe you don't like to happen while you're in the movie theater. So I think that the latter negatives outweigh the positives that people find in their homes. So I think that more and more you're going to see fewer movies that are going to be made for the $200 million and need to go to the theater, so that the only way the studio can make their money back is if it's shown in the theater. They're going to be making movies that, if possible, could go straight video on demand and also be franchise movies. So this is the event that's that's forcing that change. They're going to be talking about this in the industry. You do an industry case study, they're going to be talking about COVID-19 and what happened to Tenet, Mulan, and Wonder Woman, and the Furious 9, and all of these big tentpole movies that had to be pushed back or eventually maybe had to go direct to streaming. So like I've said in the past, y'all, go invest in a good television set and a good sound system, the best affordable one you can get, or maybe wait till next year and then get one, because this is the way we're going to be watching movies here on out, many of them. Next, we have the recap of Hightown. So go get some snacks, go get a stiff drink, and we'll go pay some bills. Be back in a minute. Don't go away.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right. We're back. This is my favorite part. Kinda of the show. We're gonna go over the latest episode of Hightown. But before I start in on Hightown, I want to give you my first impressions of the new HBO series Perry Mason. Now, it's a retelling prequel of the Perry Mason character that was created by author Earl Stanley Gardner, and it was made famous on television by Raymond Burr, or at least he was the titular character. He played the titular character, Perry Mason. Raymond Burr's probably most famous role. And it was good. Perry Mason in syndication. I am old, but I'm not so old that I watched Perry Mason when it was on the air live. But when in syndication, Perry Mason was probably something, I'll probably put it with Perry Mason, Star Trek, and for some of my friends, surprisingly, the Andy Griffith Show. I never watched Andy Griffith. I was like a Dick Van Dyke Show, Perry Mason, Star Trek guy. In syndication, I used to watch them all the time. So anyway, enough about my dorky past. Here's the premise of this new Perry Mason. In 1932, the Great Depression grips the United States, but Los Angeles is prospering thanks to an oil boom, the film industry, and the Summer Olympic Games. And there's a massive evangelical Christian revival. Does that sound familiar to you? Down-and-out private investigator Perry Mason is retained for a sensational child kidnapping trial, and his investigation portends major consequences for Mason, his client, and the city itself. Much different from the Perry Mason of Raymond Burr, which is an attorney, very smooth attorney, very low-key guy, doesn't raise his voice often. And I never read any of the Earl Stanley Gardner Perry Mason novels, so I'm assuming that the Perry Mason in the novels is an attorney as well, much like Raymond Burr. So this is sort of a reimagining of the Perry Mason character. They're on the second episode of the series now. It aired last night. I'm recording this on Monday. Sunday nights, it comes on HBO. And all I'll tell you, because I don't want to spoil anything for those of you who plan on watching and haven't been watching it yet, I think it looks spectacular. The production designer, the set designers, and the costume designers have done a fantastic job recreating the look and the feel of Depression-era Los Angeles, or at least what I would imagine it to be. You know, so I give those two elements of the production A pluses. It is mesmerizing to watch for someone like, I like noir stuff of that time period, Hollywood style, and that's what this is. I like it a lot. The jury is still out, however, on the storytelling and the direction from me. Right now, the plot is a bit convoluted and it's choppy. However, they seem to be building a rather expansive universe here, and I don't mean Game of Thrones level. However, there are several moving parts, several subplots. They've introduced several characters in these last 2 episodes, and so I'm going to give them about 4 or 5 episodes to get their stride. You know, I'm hoping for a lot. Thankfully, between the acting, and the cast includes Matthew Rhys of The Americans, great actor, John Lithgow speaks for himself, Shea Wiggum, and Julia Rylance. They are all very good. And so between the acting and the cinematography, it's easy to do. It's easy for me to give them 4 or 5 episodes. And in fact, I'll tell you, I'll watch this whole season. But it will be a disappointment. It'll be a great disappointment if the series does not deliver, because the production is so good. And if you're watching Perry Mason 2, also, please email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com. I'd love to know what you think. I'd like to know what you think, where it's going in the plot. Anything you'd like to tell me about Perry Mason, please write me and I will read all emails on the air. Now for Hightown, the penultimate episode of Hightown, because next week is the finale, shifts the focus away from Jackie somewhat and hones in on Junior instead, with a scramble to try to find him before Osito does. Hightown delivers a pretty enjoyable episode, even if a lot of the drama we're seeing here is a result of joining the already established dots together rather than carving out a new road for itself. This was actually, as you know, if you've been listening to me, I'm not very complimentary of the series, but this episode did bring a lot of things together, finally. Not that I like the series anymore, but it was good to see that some of these roads or these loose hairs didn't just go off into nothing. Episode 7 of Hightown begins with Jackie using her initiative after the tip-off of Junior's boat. She found out that Junior's boat was the one that was used to dump the body of Sherry. So meanwhile, Ray, the cop, he makes breakfast in bed for Renee. That's the stripper. After his bad dream, he had a bad dream involving Sherry, who the girl whose body was just dumped, that I mentioned got dumped off the boat. She was the CI who got murdered within the first 3 minutes of the series. Apparently, she was Ray's CI, confidential informant, before she got murdered. So things are getting pretty serious between Ray and Renee. That's why he made her breakfast in bed, something she says, obviously, that she's never had done for her before. So Ray admits his true feelings for her, and Renee reciprocates. And so they're all googly-eyed, lovey-dovey. However, it's a little difficult to work out if he's being honest or not, given that she has a deal with Frankie, her boyfriend in prison, or at least the father of her son in prison, who said he wanted her to get close to them. But it's hard to believe because the chemistry between the two actors is non-existent. I do not believe this romance whatsoever. Speaking of Frankie, who's in prison, he gets a hold of a burner phone, as one is wont to do in prison, and he calls up Osito. And he tells him to take care of the situation surrounding the detective asking about him. And the person asking about him is Frankie and also Jackie. Ray's snitch inside the prison. Ray just arrested this guy who is in prison. He doesn't do so well because he gets stabbed to death by one of Frankie's contacts in the medication line right in front of the doctor. Now, this scene is another clue for me that the showrunners are young and they're good writers are doing the best they can, but they obviously have never spent any time in prison or know anyone who has. And just trust me on this one without going into detail, that murder never would have happened that way. So while it was good for the show and I guess it moved the plot forward, it didn't need to be that dramatic and it was fake. Okay. Also, Ray gets a hold of the news. He finds out that his informant has been killed in prison. So he rallies the troops, his co-workers, to protect anyone who Frankie may be going after, because he wants to make sure that he has some witnesses that can roll on Frankie. Primarily, he's looking for Osito and Junior, who they have a picture of. Renee arrives and drops off Ray's jacket, which he left over at her house. And Ray convinces her to leave. He's like, "What are you doing here?" Ray tells her never to do this again. It's a bad look for him. And Renee looks hurt because he doesn't want to be seen in the precinct with her. You know, she's like, "What's wrong? What's the problem?" Even though she realized that she was a CI and she's a stripper and he's a freaking detective, that suddenly, now that they're all in love, everything is different, which I thought she could have understood that. But anyway, she looks all sad when she leaves, and she saw a receipt that Ray had that he was turning in for some expenses for his confidential informant. So she feels all hurt because now she's not his girlfriend, even though he confided in her that, yes, I was with you at first because you were going to be a CI. Anyway. Meanwhile, Jackie continues to struggle to get through to Junior. And so while hiding out in a motel room, Junior calls his girlfriend and admits what he's done in the past, and he breaks things off with her. Osito arrives at his girlfriend's house looking for Junior. Of course, she says she doesn't know where he is. And Osito and Kizzle, the guy who's with him, the guy who's like a cheap M&M, they leave empty-handed. So naturally, soon after Osito leaves, Jackie arrives and asks Junior's girlfriend about him and asks, where he is and tells him about the situation. This brings her to the motel room where Jackie is able to confront Junior about dumping Sherry's body and how he was involved. Of course, Junior doesn't give her any information, and midway during this conversation, Osito arrives with Kizzle, and, Junior finds a way to get Jackie out of the room without, getting killed by Osito. And she immediately phones Ray and asks for his help. So after exchanging information, Ray realizes that Junior is in serious trouble and phones through to the station for information about the car that Osito is driving. Given how Krista phoned and Jackie was too high to pick up her call, she convinces Ray to let her tag along with the officers as they burst into the garage looking for Osito. Something else that would have never happened in reality because there's no way the cops would have brought Jackie along just because she felt guilty about what she did. Anyway, Osito's not at the garage. Meanwhile, Osito and Kizzle get Junior in a car and they bring him out in the middle of the woods to murder him like Frankie had ordered. Kizzle is a complete loose cannon, and he starts counting down before he was going to shoot Junior in the head. But before he hits 3, Osito shoots him in the head, and anyone who didn't see that one coming hasn't been paying attention. All this episode, they were giving Osito reasons to be upset at Kizzle, and he didn't want to kill Junior. Junior and Osito bury the body, and they cut off the hands and the head and throw it in the water, as murderers will do. And they say their goodbyes, and he promises Osito he'll do his best to stay clean, and he readies himself to go into exile in Miami. Osito tells him that as far as Frankie knows, he's going to tell him that he's dead, and Osito's also probably going to lay low for a while in the Dominican Republic. Meanwhile, Ray and Jackie manage to arrest a kid in connection to where Junior is and track down his location. As they drive off together, it turns out Ray has an equally guilt-ridden part in all this, as he feels responsible for Sherry's death after he promised to keep her safe. As Jackie and Ray arrive at their destination, the tip-off about the bus happens to be a dud, as Junior is nowhere to be seen. Instead, the camera pans across a bathroom back at the original bus stop, and Junior is slumped in the bathroom stall, laying motionless after a heroin overdose. He appears to be dead. His eyes are open, so he appears to be dead. And this is really the only plot turn of the entire season that was not completely predictable. So I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I did not see this part where Junior dies or killed himself or whatever happened. The question is, was the OD self-inflicted, or did Osito give him a hot shot and kind of play him at his own game? We'll have to wait for next week's finale to find out. The thing is that Hightown got a second season, and I'm not so sure I even care to see the end of this season. And I wonder what in the world are they going to do to make people want to see more of these characters, because none of them seem that interesting in the first place. And I don't know where this is going. So this finale better be a doozy, and I'll let you know next week. And that's it. So I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC Television Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show and to write a nice review. That really helps us out. It helps us grow, and that's what we're trying to do. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, appreciate it. Please remember to email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com with any requests for the show, anything you'd like me to cover, or any feedback that you have for me about the show. I'll read all email on the show, and I love doing that. I'm talking to you, Tyrion. Listen, I know we're in some strange and challenging times right now. Let's all try to pull together through this. We're in a worldwide pandemic. So remember, please wash your hands often. Limit your close-up and personal interaction with people if you can. Always wear a mask if you go out, please. If you can't, especially if you're going to be in a situation in which you can't distance yourself, socially distance very well, just wear a mask, please. Have a safe and productive week. Until we meet again, stream with care. We're going to be looking for new shows to cover, and maybe we can get you some new dates also on some movies, or some movies that are going to go straight to video on demand. I think you're going to have a lot to choose from. I really do. Listen, Jack and I love you guys. Be kind to one another, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
I don't claim you can have a better time with Colt 45 than without it. But why take chances?
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.